Liam, I wanted to talk to you about drugs and drug crime on the island.
I think it's a massive problem. It's an epidemic on the Isle of Man. There's.
Well, Gary Roberts, Chief Constable, said 10 years ago, in 2011, they pulled one 16-year-old for carrying drugs. 20 last year. 20 last year. So it's going up and up and up. How do young people cope with this?
I think everyone in here knows people that are involved with drugs. And I think, to be honest, you're lying to yourself if you don't, because it's a massive problem in young people.
Now, why is that?
I think people are seen isolated maybe, and they may not have ways and means to make money, or perhaps it's because the older people are more influential over them and are getting them involved.
Is it peer pressure? Are they just vulnerable kids? Why is this?
Both, to be honest with you. I think it's peer pressure, the wanting to make money, but the not knowing how, because for people my age, there isn't the availability of information of how to make money properly.
Well, you did it. You work at JD Sports.
Yeah, but I had help from my parents, my family, where maybe if you don't have that infrastructure at home, then it's not that easy for people. Or maybe it's because people just want something to do, because there's nothing to do for kids. Well, because when you pass your test and you go out driving, where do you go and what do you do? There's nowhere to go, nothing to do.
Well, you live in Peel?
I live in Glenfarne.
Oh, crikey, what's there to do in Glen? They can't even open the co-op.
There's nothing to do. There's shops, there's things like that, but everything to do costs money. And that's the reality of it. And if you don't have money to go out and do those things, then where are you going to get your money from?
And so what do you do then?
You sit around in your car or you go and play footy, really.
Do you go to the cinema at all?
No, well, it costs money.
Yeah.
And where are you getting money
from?
Or
you go bowling to Ramsey or something like that?
But that costs money as well. So what do you do if you don't have the money to do that?
So is there anything in Glenvine for young people to do?
There's nothing in Peel really, is there? Because if you got in Peel with your mates, what are you going to do?
Do you play football yourself?
I play rugby. I've played for the island and club level.
Who do you play for?
I play for Vagabonds.
Right, so where do you train at? Do you train at Vagas?
I'm playing at Ballafletcher twice a week.
Yeah. So, but that will obviously take a lot of energy and time, but you've got to be able to get there as well. So do you drive?
Yeah. I don't. I'm taking my test soon. So.
Right, so you get ferried by parents?
Yeah, my parents, yeah.
Yeah. So if you haven't got parental support to do something like that...
Yeah, then you've got paid to get the bus.
Yeah, there'll be young people who are going to be stuck with nothing to do, no money, and no way of doing something.
Yeah, completely. Because what if you're not into sport? Then what do you do?
Iliam, how do you break that circle? Is this? We live on a really prosperous Isle of Man. We live, the Isle of Man, and when you get to the age of 18, if you've got 2 arms and 2 legs and you want to work, you can earn £30,000 in the finance sector. So why are young people...
Yeah, but that's only if you have the qualifications, though. If you think we won't get at school, then you have to get a trade. But then there's not too many apprenticeships about at the minute. So to break the circle, you have to offer young people things to do. You have to offer the advice, you have to make the advice so readily available that from the age of 4, you know that you don't go near drugs. That's how you do it, because I have friends that have been in a lot of trouble with the police because of it. And I think most people here know a lot of people that have.
But they don't anticipate that, do they? They don't think, this is a way to get in trouble with the police, I'll do it.
Because not people putting people's names in the paper, they're not putting people's names everywhere. Where if you have people's names that you know, or your parents are even going to, or people in schools are going, this person has had this happen to them, then that's how you know, realistically, because if not, then you only see the money, which I think is why a lot of people do get into it as well.
Well, optimistic or pessimistic about the future, Iliam?
Well, I think there's only the reality, and the reality is it's only going to get worse. And unless there is something done about it, then it is only going to get worse.
Let's talk about climate change then. Let's go to Matt. You're involved in the climate change?
The Student Climate Network. I've been involved for like 2 years now-ish. And I'm just working on like running errands here with like the beef and stuff. Coming from like a vegetarian and like definitely like a Marxist point of view, people love to like go this.
You're a vegetarian Marxist.
Yes, going from this like point of view that and this like narrative that people just think it's just like a single farmer and just cooking beef, and people place a lot of emphasis on like the user and like driving and you need to reduce all this when it's really like it's the oil companies at the end of the day. We like all saw like the fire in the Gulf of Mexico, like and that whole water crisis, and people just thought about it for a day or two and then we just kind of moved on. And And I feel like people just keep pushing and pushing that we need to do better instead of the people who are actually harming, who are like farming oil out of like Middle Eastern countries and like really damaging the ocean beds. And I feel like we all saw like Seaspiracy, that one movie. I feel like everyone like for like a week was like, oh wow, this is so bad, we just need to stop eating fish, and then no one cared again. And I feel like we don't do enough to like put like the companies responsible, and just we keep blaming ourselves.
And why does nobody ever mention China?
I don't know why nobody mentions China. I know there's like a current like a conspiracy almost of like the Uyghur Muslims being like genocided there, and there's definitely they like a lot to put like a lot of like xenophobia on how they have like traditions of like eating like I know there's a certain festival like cats and dogs and stuff like that, and I feel like that's just a different culture, but also people use that to just fuel their own biases of what they think about, like especially Chinese people like on the island have like seen a massive spike in like hate crimes, and even just my friend recently on the bus was just hate crimes, and I feel like people don't pay enough attention to that rather than just generalizing.
But if
everyone.
countries like China are opening coal-fired power stations every couple of months, which they are doing, if countries like Germany are farming open-cast coal and opening coal-fired power stations, how can we do something on the Isle of Man to mitigate climate change when countries far bigger than the Isle of Man don't seem to be paying any notice?
Well, definitely on the Isle of Man, I feel like we are very progressive in the sense of like climate justice, and we got like the one power station at the top, like Point of Air, where we like burn plastic, but it's very like eco-conscious. Sadly, there's not a whole lot we can do, especially with like a really smaller nation. But just like spreading awareness and like fixing like our own internal biases of what we perceive of other countries is definitely like a big thing we need to go through.
Matthew?
Yeah, I think I agree with both Aaron and Matt over there. I think that doing things on a small scale can sometimes seem fruitless when you've got massive aeronautic companies pumping so much CO2 into the atmosphere with every flight. I think, but I think then it's about, we can't change the world ourselves maybe, but we can start. We can one step at a time. If you change your life personally to be as eco-conscious as you can, that adds up eventually. You've got 80,000 people on the Isle of Man. If we're all eco-conscious, it's not changing a nation, but it's 80,000 people more eco-conscious.
So does this come from the ground up? Does it? In sociology, they say systems push down, people push up. Who's going to do this then? Is it the government introducing a system where we can be eco-conscious, or is it people just saying, I'm going to be eco-conscious?
I think it's both. I think there's a balance there. I think if the government doesn't engage the people...
You live in Peel, yeah?
I do, yeah.
How do you recycle in Peel?
I mean, we've got the pencil banks at ShopRite, so we use them. But I think, again, there's not a lot of education around that. You know, like the government has to engage young people and make being eco-friendly and being health conscious a part of life. Because at the moment, it's an inconvenience to recycle, whereas what it should be is just another thing that you do from when you're, like Iliam said, 4 years old. You've got to really start at the bottom with this.
Okay. Jake, do you think COVID-19's affected how people approach things in general?
Yeah, I think everyone's a bit more conscious about booking flights, and I think their consumption, their spending patterns have definitely changed. People are spending more online and less in like the local area, because I mean, on the Isle of Man, it's starting to pick up again more, but I think definitely during COVID, no one was spending any money. It was just online buying things, and it wasn't kind of pumping the money into the Isle of Man that we could use to change anything. And
do you buy online?
I do buy online, but I try to, if I know I can go to the local shop, I will. Yeah, especially for...
What do you buy online?
What do I buy online? Anything I can't get in the Isle of Man. So, like football boots, stuff like that. But I try to like go to the butchers. There's Tate Traditional Butchers over there, down in Peel. I try to buy my meat from.
Do you know anybody who's had COVID at all?
Yeah, one of my friends during the first lockdown had COVID, and he was very, very ill. And
how old was he?
He was 16 at the time, I think.
How is he now?
He's fine now. He still doesn't have a smell though.
After a year?
Yeah, he still can't smell at all.
So what do you say to there's still the conspiracy people who say this is all a big hoax?
I mean, it could be, but yeah. I mean, when you actually look at the patterns, every 100 years, something happens like this. Like obviously there was the plague and stuff, and that was in, I think, I mean, I don't want to say the date because I'll probably get it wrong, but it was like it happens every 100 years. Something majorly goes wrong. I think it could be China starting something, but I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist.
And Aaron, do you know anybody who's had COVID?
I do. A couple of my friends had COVID. One of them was, I think he said he was really close to having to go to hospital with it. He was really not well with it. And another one, he was quite unwell with it as well. So it is something that has been affecting everyone.
Well, things are changing now. The borders are opening on the Isle of Man. There are more and more people coming in.
Yeah.
Cases are going up, but the government says don't take any notice of the cases.
Yeah, I think that is a fair point. As you said with the COVID figures at the start of the show, it is most people have been vaccinated at least once. So
Anybody here been vaccinated?
Yeah, I got my first one.
Why did you get vaccinated?
Well, originally it was kind of one of two things. I had atmosphere. I had asthma when I was younger as a child, so I qualified through that. But also, there was a bit of confusion when 3FM put out that anybody under 30 could be vaccinated. So I obviously applied at that point, as I knew I was going to be going away for the race season, and I didn't know the regulations about what I would need to come back and go away and that kind of thing. But then they changed it to over 18, but I'd already been booked in for my first vaccination at that point. So
which one did you have?
I had the Pfizer.
Did you? And Aaron, did you socially distance on the farm?
we did. We had to put together contingency plans.
How does that work?
So my grandparents live on the farm. Me and my parents were living out elsewhere. So we were the backup in case they became ill. So when it was during calving season last year when COVID first hit. So we had to go up and calve cows. But what we did was, if me and my dad were on the yard, we always wore gloves, had sanitizer, sanitised everything down, wiped everything down, and they stayed on either in the house or in a completely different part of the yard, and we only left. We only went up to do what we needed to do and then went again.
And was that practical?
From a actually getting stuff done point, it was fine. Like, we got everything done we needed to do and everything worked fine. But from a social aspect, I think it really did. It didn't do very much good for my grandparents, as they are getting on. So they weren't able to go and see their friends. My grandma wasn't able to go to the WI, and it didn't do them any good mentally. So
Soon be the Royal Show, anyway.
Yeah, it will be that. I'm looking forward to that.
Emily, we were talking last night on Max Radio about first-time buyers and young people getting into the housing market. Is that something you're conscious of, something that you're looking at?
Well, I haven't really looked, but I am aware that it's very, the cost of living over here is very high.
Do you know how much a house is?
No.
How much is a house, Iliam?
What the average? Well, for a 3-bed semi-detached house, you're on about £290,000, I believe I'm right in saying.
Erin, are you looking at the property market at all? I mean, you're only year 12, I know that, but is the property market something you think is attainable to young people?
Not at all. I think that the Isle of Man, obviously because the college doesn't offer, it offers a very wide range of courses, and a lot of people do stay on the Isle of Man for further education, but also a lot of people go to uni, and yet the Isle of Man wants the young people to come back, but there is no way for us to come back if we can't afford to live over here after we've had to pay masses to go to university. Even with help, it's expensive, and then I'm just scared that if I want to come back, I'm going to have to live with my parents until I'm like 30, 40.
Do you see buying your own home is that a goal to you, that you will be your life will be better if you owned your own property?
Yeah, I think it's the sense of accomplishment that you've managed to do that yourself, and the sense of independence, because even if you can't buy a property per se, rent is expensive. Apartments aren't cheap either. So being able to not necessarily live alone, whether you live with a partner, with friends, and however you do it, but it's expensive, but I feel like it's just not attainable unless you are earning a lot of money for a young person.
Yeah. Finlo, will you look to buy your own property in the future?
Hopefully, but I'm a bit worried with how it's looking at the moment, because it is getting quite bad. Do
you think it's better to own your own property or to rent?
Well, I imagine it'd be better to own, because then you could make it your own and stay there rather than have to give it up after a few years.
The politicians are going to be looking for your votes in September. Have you registered to vote?
Not yet, but I imagine I'll be influenced into doing it.
By?
My father.
Do you ever talk about politics at home?
It sprouts up occasionally. My dad works at DEFA, so he mingles with some politicians. He's worked with Jeffrey Boot a bit with conservation around the island.
What did you think of those elms, by the way?
I wouldn't know.
The elms have been saved.
Oh, good to hear.
Happy about that?
Yes.
Jolly good. And Aaron, what do you think about those elms?
Against popular opinion, I think they should have gone down. It is a dangerous road. It is not a fun road to drive on. I've had to pull out onto that road a few times from a similar spot, and it is really quite dangerous. If they've found other measures to keep the elms there, that's good, because it's keeping the trees up. You never want to see old trees cut down, but sometimes safety has to take a priority. So I think it probably would have been a good idea.
It's a very tempting road, though, isn't it? It's a long, straight road. And
yeah.
You get somebody pootling along in a little Suzuki you want to overtake.
Yeah.
Even in a tractor.
Yeah. Well, I drive a little Suzuki, so I'm not often pootling up and down it, to be honest. But yeah, it is a tempting road. It is quite a dangerous road, and I think the 50 mile an hour speed limit's probably quite accurate on there to keep people from doing.
Jake, what did you think about the elms?
I don't really know much about them, to be honest, but I mean, going back to about the housing market, I think it's actually kind of affecting teachers almost, because the government is trying to get young teachers over here to fill in the gaps, but when they look over here and they see the price of the housing, the price of the living it's absolutely outrageous, to be honest. I just think it's so hard to get young teachers over here, because why would they want to live over here where it's super expensive to live when they can live in England, which for much, much cheaper? I think there should be a program run by the government to try to get young teachers over here and give them like discounts, not discounts, but like help them buy houses, because trying to fill in the gaps for teachers is just hard. And because if you pluck one from one school, then it goes a gap in another school, and it's just a cycle, to be honest. So I think there should be a program by the government to try to fill that gap and get teachers over here and young teachers, because I mean, the more education, the better teachers we have, I think it'll just change, because it will help with the drug problem if better teachers and like steer young people to different routes and things. But because of the lack of teachers, I just think it's hard for schools to keep up.
You're not short of teachers at QE2, are you? Is there a shortage here?
I wouldn't really. We've had some problems, yeah.
Yes.
But
very diplomatic.
I just think more young teachers need to just come over and.
You see, if you do that for teachers, the medical professions say do it for nurses as well, and the police would say do it for police. So we're talking about essential workers, then, aren't we?
Yeah, I just think they should help get essential workers over here and get them living over here and permanently here, not just here for a year or so.
Do you think there's a drug problem amongst young people on the island?
Oh, yeah, 100%. As Illiam said, everyone knows someone that is involved with drugs. I just think it is the vulnerable, it is the people from people who haven't never been steered towards a career path and been educated about how bad it is and what they can do, and not knowing their potential in life, kind of thing. They don't know what they can do and achieve. So I just think more teachers and more essential workers and almost better education will, in the long term, help all the drug problems and education and everything. I think.
And in the long term, it would probably save the Isle of Man money, because we wouldn't be shelling out money for legal aid or for putting people in bail hostels or things like that. And, you know, you have somebody who could enter a life of crime purely because of one mistake made in their teenage years, and surely we could do something about that. Yeah,
because, I mean, these years are like the most important years of our lives, because it kind of chooses what path we're going to go down in life. And I think the more that we help kids and steer them on the right track, the better.